Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Film Club, where I am joined every episode by a great guest to talk about two amazing movies. We are going to explore how those films have influenced or been influenced by the history of Warhammer and where they intersect with our own experiences in the Warhammer hobby. Today I'm joined by Mike Hutchinson. Mike, how are you doing, mate? You're right.
Hello, I'm good.
Great stuff. We've got a couple of really fun films today. We're talking about Time Bandits and we're talking about The Devils, which I will say we'll talk a little bit more before we get into it. But it was a controversial movie at the time. It was quite a powerful movie, and it challenged a lot of folks who watched it. So we'll do a proper exploration of some of that content and where the sensitivities lie with it when we get to it. But we're going to start with Time Bandits, right? Are these two? I mean, are you a big film watcher, Mike? Do you watch a lot of movies?
I did film at university. Particularly when I was like a teenager and through my 20s, I was a voracious consumer of film. Since getting into my 30s and getting distracted with other things, I became a much less avid film watcher, and particularly since I've had kids about 8 years ago. Like, I've tried to pick up on some of the biggest new releases, but like I actually just don't take enough very much time to watch movies these days compared to what I used to. I also had a grandfather, my mum's dad. He was a massive movie nut. He's an architect and a massive movie nut, and he would always bring me things on VHS. So like formative moments in my childhood include him like bringing over 2001 on VHS and sitting me down and being like, you must watch this film. This is an important piece of cinema.
Right.
So one of my grandfather's utter favorite films was Brazil by Terry Gilliam,
Right.
which I still think is Terry Gilliam's finest film by a long shot. And so I watched Terry Gilliam's Brazil as a kid, and it blew my mind. And I've watched it many times since, and I still think it's an incredible piece. And so my understanding of Time Bandits, just to get a little biographical, is that he wanted to make Brazil. He had the script written for Brazil, but it was too weird to fund, and no one would pick it up. So he went away and wrote a much more commercial sort of kids family movie, which itself was ended up being quite hard to finance, but
Sure.
George Harrison stepped in to
Yeah,
finance it,
fascinating history on that side of it, which I guess we'll get to, right?
as I think he did with Brazil as well. But anyway, so like my connection to Time Bandits is watching it as a kid, but like already knowing that Terry Gilliam was like a powerhouse film director, which
Mm.
probably isn't the way that most people arrive at Time Bandits.
Sure,
A
yeah, that
jolly film about a kid, you know. It's basically like Bill and Ted, but with a British kid.
that is a good way to describe it. Yeah, and actually, let's do a quick overview of Time Bandits as a film and as a story, I suppose. And it is this kid who he's not. His parents don't really pay him enough attention. He's not got the nicest home life. He's
Oh,
got
his parents are absolute assholes, aren't
Yeah,
they?
really not invested in him at all, and not helping sort of feed his imagination and
Yeah,
help
they're like
him
they're like
grow.
Roald Dahl parents. They're like
Yes,
kind of
very
like
much so.
Matilda's parents or something.
Yeah, absolutely that, absolutely. And then in his bedroom, he's got all of these toys and all the sort of. He obviously loves history because he's got all of this stuff up on the wall with like Napoleonic war scenes and cowboys and all sorts. And then into his room breaks this group of time bandits who are almost multi-dimensional time traveling angels, essentially, it seems. But they've gone rogue from the Supreme Being. They've stolen his time map of the universe, and they've decided that they're just going to go through all of these different periods of history, and they're going to steal loads of stuff. And they're going to take that and just get rich, and then presumably go off and live somewhere. And then the kid gets drawn into this adventure. So they're sort of fleeing from the Supreme Being who is chasing them to get the map back. They find themselves in all of these different odd situations where they're trying to do heists from like Napoleon's vaults after a successful battle. But there's also this embodiment of pure evil who wants the map for himself as well, and he's sort of
Hmm.
trying to manipulate them through the course of it. And then there's the sort of final climactic encounter. So this is a film. I mean, like you say, I mean, it's very Gilliam to me. It's very Terry Gilliam. So it is, he has a certain style that is very kind of chaotic and grubby, which I think actually is one of the reasons a lot of his work feels very sort of Warhammer adjacent to me.
Hmm.
And Rick Priestley has mentioned Time Bandits in particular as being one of the films that kind of represented a certain influence, the kind of Monty Python influence that flowed into early Warhammer creation. And I think you can really see that because this world is the world that they go through and the way in which the characters sort of carry themselves and the way they're dressed and all that sort of stuff. They look cool, but there's also a grubbiness, I would I would say.
Right. And actually if you take the three films in, I think it's sometimes described as his imagination trilogy. If you
Right.
take the three films that he made one after another, so Time Bandits, then Brazil, then The Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen, they've all got that same like grubby, highly dreamlike, like
Mm.
lots of colors, lots of tones, but they're all kind of slightly desaturated and covered in filth. And they've got a sort of lots of practical effects, almost like stage show sort of. There's quite a lot of scenes which are like almost framed like stage shows. I mean, you literally get
Yeah.
some stage show stuff in Time Bandits, but in relation to like the early chaotic nature of Warhammer, like all three of those films, like the bombast and the ridiculous outfits and the sort of strange flying machines and things of Baron Munchausen just feels straight out of like the core of the Empire in the Warhammer Old World. The like bizarre like humanity consuming bureaucracy of infinite
Mm.
terror and everyone that thinks independently is a terrorist, like just feels like the Imperium
Yeah.
of man, when it's explored in those grubby ways that like Dan Abnett does so well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then the Time Bandit has got like both of those things in it. It's like sort of lots of like it's grabbing like memes from all over the place. You've got like you've got Napoleon, but you've also got Robin Hood, and you've got kind of different things being grabbed in the way that the Warhammer world was just like, yeah, we'll grab like a bit of stuff from British mythology for the Bretonians, and we'll grab some like Egyptian mythology for the Tomb Kings or whatever. Like Terry Gilliam's style is very like yeah, mix it all up, grab it in, and just make it kind of, let the same characters charge through it with that sort of as the connecting thread.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a wild roller coaster ride. Like you're sort of pinballing around really between all of these different time periods. And how is Kevin, I think is the name of the kid, and how he
Hmm.
becomes sort of like this unwilling participant who's just sort of joins up with this group and they end up going on their traveling between these time periods. I mean, one of the early ones that they go to is this Robin Hood uh England, and they decide that they see a couple of pleasant folk who have been held up by highwaymen, and the highwaymen are like really grubby and really like muddy and messy and a bit savage, and they're like, well, those are the guys we want to team up with. So they go to try and team up with them, and then they want to get their leader and speak to the leader of these savage sort of like woodsmen, and then out comes John Cleese as Robin Hood, but he's in his pristine green sort of classic
Yeah,
pantomime
doing a
outfit.
doing a sort of like royal family member meeting working class people routine.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
it's fantastic. Yeah, because he's literally he walks along the line of Time Bandits and shakes their hands and just asks them what they do and why they're there, and it's fantastically good. And he's just really nice as well. And he ends up taking a load of their treasure. But yeah, that kind of like
The film was written by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin. They worked on the scripts together. Michael Palin wanted that Robin Hood role, but they wouldn't let him do it. They said it'll be better with a more recognizable face. So Michael
which
Palin Michael Palin responded by playing multiple characters.
yeah, but those multiple characters are all very put upon and unlucky in both love and life because they're the
Yeah.
couple. He's part of the couple who get robbed by the merry men, and then later on, in a sort of reincarnation of him and his would be bride, where he's sort of trying to propose. it just so happens that they're on the Titanic just before it goes down. So Palin's recast himself into multiple roles that are all really sad, really.
So, all right, a couple of questions about what you think the story is that's going on in
Okay.
this movie, because the reincarnation of Michael Palin and um,
Shelley Duvall, is
Bob
it?
Shelley Duvall. Sorry, kept getting Isabel Dejani in my head, but Shelley Duvall, uh, and the reincarnation or reemergence of Sean Connery,
Mhm.
and the fact that like the battle at the end just sort of takes the floor of his bedroom and then like grows
Yes.
it out into a big sort of like is this just a flight of his imagination? Is this an escapist fantasy for a frustrated, sad little boy?
Mm.
Like, I don't know that there's one reading for this, but like, there's certainly like Terry's definitely put that possibility through the whole film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, and I think it is a very valid reading of that. This all of this stuff is basically the toys and the games that he has in his room and the stuff he has up on his wall. You kind of see all of those different things. It just so happens that the different time periods they travel to are all things that he's already interested in and already a fan of. And you could therefore sort of say, okay, well, this is all just a weird, vivid dream that he's having one night.
Have you seen Pan's Labyrinth by
I have
Tell
seen
Me
Pan's
Tomorrow?
Labyrinth, yeah.
Because like that's very definitely like an escapist to my eyes. That's very definitely an escapist dream of a sad child.
Right.
But like they almost have like a strange resonance between the two of them, I think.
Sure, I could see that. Yeah, yeah, and I think the strongest case for me that it is just a flight, like a dream or a flight of fancy, is probably at the end and at the start. But I'll come back to that. At the end, you have the sort of evil fortress that the climactic action takes place in. Like you say, is essentially built out of his
It's made of
floor of
Lego.
his bedroom. It's made of Lego. There's these huge Lego blocks everywhere that are actually all of the crumbling walls of the fortress are just massive black Lego bricks, which I think is fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And there's also earlier on in the movie, before the adventure with the Time Bandits begins, a knight just bursts out of his wardrobe and rides off into the distance
Mm.
in his bedroom. There's no evidence for what this is or how it occurred. So both of those
Well,
things.
there was a time hole in his cupboard.
Well,
Come
I
on,
guess
it's
you. Well,
very
that's true.
specifically described. It's
That
even
is
written on a
true.
map.
But then I guess his wardrobe just is reconstructed or is from another
Oh, right.
time or something like that.
Yes, Dad's like, what is it? All right.
Yeah. So there's enough playful stuff for it to be either. I kind
Yeah.
of prefer that it's real though,
Mhm.
and I think that the sort of reincarnation of so he meets Sean Connery in Mycenae at one point. We'll talk more about that in a moment. It's great sequence. I really like it. But then at the very end of the movie, after his house burns down, the firemen turn up to put the fire out, and the nice Sean Connery character is back as well. So it's like a little odd moment there of reincarnation. I kind of prefer that that's all real, and maybe the Supreme Being gave him this adventure to make his life more fulfilled and to lead him to a better life, essentially, because the
Yeah,
one
and
that he
like
had
I'm
wasn't great.
exploring this because it's fun. I don't believe that any film needs a single reading. I just don't think
Sure,
that's
yeah,
required. I
yeah,
don't think that's required from the director's intention nor from the consumption of the text. I think the
sure.
text has both in. I also think that there's definitely a theme of like parental replacement. Like he meets a lot of potential father figures on
Mm,
his journey. And I think the fact that the dwarfs alongside him um, are like they're all grown-ups with grown-up concerns, but they all share his like physical viewpoint. Like the height of the camera throughout the film is at
sure.
their height,
Yeah.
and like it's almost like there's this tension in in Kevin's character between like he's going around trying to find a new father figure, like not literally, but like will it be Sean Connery? Will it
Mm,
be this like old troll that he meets? Like will it be and but at the same time he's like getting a peer group of grown-ups and sort of growing into an adult profession of being a professional time robber. It's strange. And then at the end of the movie, spoilers, of course, when his parents explode,
Yeah.
which is an amazing way to end the film. And more films should take that sort of risk. There's a few interviews with Terry Gilliam where he said he was fighting with the production team because they were like, you can't end the film with his parents exploding. That's ridiculous. And he was like, look, let's just do a test screening. And they screened it in front of kids. And like the first three kids that came out, they were like, what was your favorite bit? Oh, the bit where the parents exploded. And so he was like, see, and the producer was like, yeah, all right, fair enough, Terry. You can have your exploding parents. Kids love it. Um, yeah, like that's, that moment where his sort of his family life, his parents are erased, and
Mm.
like it zooms out, and there's a big, zoom out through the neighborhood, and then the planet, then the whole of the universe, and then onto the map. It's like, oh, okay, this is it a coming of age? Is it like he's discovered his place in the world, he's independent, or is he, you know, has he found a replacement father figure in Sean Connery? Yeah, there's definitely something going on there.
There is, and like you say, there's no definitive read, and I don't even think Gilliam would have one or would be willing to share it. And maybe he has, but I'd be surprised. And I think that's part of the sort of magic of it. It is this weird kind of fable adventure. Like not a lot of it makes sense, but it kind of doesn't have like it how hot like hangs together within its own narrative and within the events of the movie. But it's very much a hodgepodge of scenes and jokes and all sorts of nonsense that's kind of strung together in a way that's compelling enough and fun enough that you want to sort of see where it goes. I mean, there's
It,
some
it, Here's a fun thought though.
okay.
That final climactic battle where like the Greek archers arrive and then there's
Mm,
a tank and they're blowing up bits of the wall and there's Lego blocks falling over. It's strange because it's like a reflection, and I think there's even a chessboard wall, because it's like a reflection of his bedroom, and like everything's slightly larger than life and unreal. It's like, in a way, like you could imagine taking like a Warhammer 40,000 like series and making it almost like that. It's like the world of Warhammer 40,000 is not like a realistic. These are not toys that
mm,
like are toy representations of something realistic. Like that's what things literally look like.
yeah.
And like, the sort of battlefields that we build out of bits and bobs and toys and bits and of stuff, like that's the most clear like cinematic reference of like what it would happen if you were shrunk down to a soldier and you were actually on like a not a Warhammer 40,000 the setting, but like a literal Warhammer
Sure.
40,000 the
So like the
tabletop game.
Barbie movie, and like you're sort of
Right.
literalizing what the toys are like, but with
Yeah.
people in that space.
Yeah, like how good would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think someone like Gilliam
Terry
would have a
Gilliam
lot of
does
fun with it.
40K.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
That'd be so good.
There is that scene. So when Sean Connery is introduced, and basically Kevin is separated from the rest of the Time Bandits, and he ends up in ancient Greece, and there is a warrior fighting against a minotaur. It's a fun action scene and some good little fight, and
It's a
then
cool interpretation of a Minotaur as well. Like
I
it's
love
obviously
it.
the cheapest possible Minotaur because it's just
Yeah,
a naked dude wearing a hat.
yes,
But the hat is really cool. Like it's a
yeah.
really cool sort of like gothic mask with like a grubby like it's like a really old piece of taxidermy that they've popped on his head.
Yeah, and that I would imagine that's exactly what has happened, right? That almost feels like the explanation of it. But yeah, I mean, even that is quite fun because obviously you're sort of saying that Greek myth is the true history that because they're going back through time, so they go back to a time when there were minotaurs, and that's just a thing, and they just fight them. And then
Do
Sean
they? Because they
Connery.
go because they go to the time of legends as well, which
Well, that's
suggests that
very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Time of Legends, I took a note down for that because that is what Games Workshop themselves, Black Library, would later on call the earlier period of fiction for
mm,
Warhammer Fantasy's world, the Time of Legends. I'm sure just
direct Gilliam.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence because it's a cool
Well,
phrase, but you
coincidence
never
slash,
know.
something buried deep in someone's
Perhaps,
childhood
right?
psychology.
Yeah, yeah. But yes, you have like a really nice like Sean Connery's not in the film a lot, but
Mm.
I thought he played his role really well as just he is like this sort of very nice fatherly figure, kind of this very what's the right word? He's just a really nice guy, I suppose, and king. he's and Kevin wants to stay there. Like he
Yeah, he's like a
immediately is
fair
like,
king. He's a supportive father
yes,
figure. Like he's
exactly
just
all
a
this.
good. He's a strong fighter.
He knows close up magic, all of this good stuff. And he and Kevin wants to stay with him. And then the Time Bandits come and, break him out against his will and continue the adventure. And things get significantly worse for for Kevin as they continue. I did like as well, because there's another bit of fable, I suppose, and legend. Yeah, you mentioned the sort of ogre, the troll. I think
Mm.
Mr. Ogre and Mrs. Ogre, who's just a regular woman with this giant oafish kind of ogre man. They live on a boat and that boat, it looks so much like a John Blanche boat to me. The
Mm.
proportions of that boat with the sort of very like a bell bottom kind of boat, really John Blanche art style. But that happens to be picked up on the head of a giant and walked around. And then, without explanation, and that's just one of
Yeah,
the challenges.
the giant then walks on land, and there's like some weird trolls with like I had to rewatch. I was rewatching a clip on YouTube, and they'd done a zoom in on the trolls in the little beach hut, and they're like
Right.
weird. They've got like a long weird nose, like some kind of what's the Muppet with the hook nose? He like looks
Oh,
like that. He's going.
sure. Well, Rizzo is it from the Muppet?
No,
That like
no,
that.
but
But then there's
okay,
also
I can't
the what
remember.
is it? The clangers, the
Yeah,
smash were the guys on the Smash adverts. Is that right? Well, there's kind of a similar sort of thing. But yeah, I know that
Gonzo.
Gonzo. But yes, Rizzo's the
Yeah,
rat, of
Gonzo.
course. I'm mistaking my Christmas Carol narrators foolishly. Yeah, there is a really weird. Like the universe is just very strange. It's full of all sorts of.
Right, and like in Monty Python, like when it cuts to those strange little like animations where there's no longer any dialogue, it's just people going like that scene where he climbs out and he goes and tramples on the troll family. Like it just feels like one of those. They just didn't animate it
Sure, yeah,
because he
very
literally goes
much.
in Terry Gilliam's normal like I'm narrating an animation way.
Yeah, funny noises are funny. That's always been a thing, I think, for Python.
In fact, I might be shifting my head canon as we speak, so that like all Skaven in the Warhammer Old World now just sound like Terry Gilliam animations.
I mean, that's fun. That is fun. I like that. Um, I suppose the sort of the climactic stuff. So they end up in the time of legends. So this
Mm,
is kind of like a weird sort of void space, and they get captured by evil, who is David Warner, who also plays the villain in Tron, of course. It's just absolutely fantastic actor, and
yes.
he's essentially playing evil. I can't remember what they call him, pure evil or something like that,
Ultimate Evil, I think.
something of that kind, right? And he is just the embodiment of evil, and he's obviously against the supreme being, which is essentially God, and he just wants the time map, and he's got a load of like weird sort of orcish kind of lab assistants who he will happily vaporize. And
Can we talk about his costume for a moment?
please, yeah.
Because, like, rewatching the film, the thing that stuck out is that David Warner's costume is literally just an Adeptus Mechanicus tech priest.
Yes,
Like,
it
he's got
is.
this long red robe in the same red that, John Blanche always uses. And then he's got this incredible piece of, like, shoulder and head contraption that, like, I think it's very directly making a reference to the face hugger from Alien. Like
Mm.
it literally like he's got a face hugger kind of on the back, and then it's like the face hugger's tail becomes these pipes that go into all this kind of strange cybernetic mechanical stuff on his back, and like round the sort of waist, the like what do you call it? Not a waistcoat, but the like a corset type thing of
Yeah.
like hard semi-transparent plastic. It like looks like goo has sort of congealed on his body, creating this kind of strange otherworldly, like, so it's a really HR Geiger inspired
Yeah.
sort of horror cyberpunk thing, and it just like it's so much like the early drawings of Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a great observation because it shares. Yeah, I would not be surprised if whether Blanche was a big fan of Time Bandits or not, but they're
I mean, you
definitely.
got to assume he's a Gilliam fan.
I would be
I've
really
never heard him
surprised if
mention
he
it, but
wasn't. Yeah, and I think that there's maybe they're sharing similar like reference points. Like they're
Well, I mean,
drawing ideas from the same kind of
they're
thing.
both clearly obsessed with Geiger. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Lots of those kinds of influences are finding their way, and then from that, similar kind of vibes are emerging in the sort of art that they're creating. I think that's definitely a thing that's happening. I One of my favorite sequences in the movie is when they are captured by evil and they're put into
yeah,
these like hanging cages. So it's just a row of these cages hanging
yeah,
just
yeah.
in a void, just in the middle of nowhere. I think that's classic. That's almost like Dungeons and Dragons style uh, being captured and you're in a cage just hanging over nothing, and then you've got to inventively find your way out, which they do
Yeah.
in a really good sort of you know press your luck mechanic kind of way, where they actually cut some of the strands of the rope, the really super thick rope that has the cage hanging from it. They start cutting a load of that off, so they make the rope that is holding the cage thinner and thinner and thinner, so that they can then build their own rope with which to swing between the cages and then hopefully get off onto the sort of solid ground. Obviously, it works out well, but it's just a really great tense sequence of events, I thought, and it's a cool setting.
I'd be delighted to know where that image of the multiple cages hanging in space comes from originally.
Mm,
Like maybe it's parallel evolution, but like I've seen it a few times recently as well, and it's such like a powerful kind of visual image. So the two places I'm thinking of it recently are like two ends of the spectrum. Like in the DLC Shadow of the Erd Tree for Elden Ring, there's like a whole dungeon with like hanging sort of what do you call them? What are these things?
but the actual cage itself,
Prison cages, sorry, is the
right?
word I was looking for. Hanging cages. There's a
Sure.
bunch of those like in a dungeon. The other thing is in Wish, the recent Disney musical
Right.
Wish. There's a scene where they're all trapped in these like hanging things, and there's like a magic. I think I'm remembering this, and there's a magical star that's being really cynical about the thing. Am I remember? Is that Disney's Wish? Anyway, I
That's
might be
yeah, that's what Wish is
misremembering.
about. I've not seen it, but I think it's
People being thrown in cages.
right.
Um, Yeah, so it's just a really strong image, but the fact that it's done in such a pure, like against a pure black background, it's so like unreal and
Mm,
cool.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and like a lot of the imagery in the film, it's like it's really stylized and almost comic booky.
sure. Yeah, and it also makes for it's one of the few times that the Time Bandits all like feels like they're really working together and all on the same page. Or that's obviously part of their arc as a group is that they're a bit divided. They've kind of got a leader who is a bit too much ego, and they say there's no leader, but he kind of acts that way, and there's a lot of that sort of squabbling, I suppose, throughout. Whereas here, in order to survive together, they all have to work together, and there's like almost a lot of sacrifice as well. There's a lot of people putting themselves in danger in those in that escape attempt, and it works out well, and then they go from there into sort of they steal the map back. There is, I mean, evil. I quite liked evil turns one of the time bandits into like a pig beast man, which I thought was fun, and then ultimately into a full pig later on.
Mm.
And there's
And
this
then when he
big
gets turned back, he's like, "Oh, I was enjoying
yeah,
that."
I was just enjoying that. Yeah, and then there's a big fight, right? They get into a big fight, and it's a classic sort of bring in the cavalry kind of moment where the time bandits. I think the limitation of the budget kind of undermines this one a little bit, but conceptually, I
Maybe,
really
yeah.
like it. You end up with this fight where they're facing down against evil, and obviously, evil being insurmountably powerful. There's no way they can win. And then the Time Bandits start appearing with people that they've recruited from different periods of time. So you do get a load of Greek archers, ancient Greek archers turn up, and a load of cowboys ride in, and a tank from World War II rolls in through the wall and
Right,
stuff
and
like
it's like Ultimate Evil is the like headmaster, and Kevin's got to give a history report, and there's no way he's done enough work for
that.
his history report.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really really fun idea, and I certainly wouldn't want to sort of do it down because of the limit. It's all on one set, it's all in one space, and it's kind of it's not. like it's not an action film. It's not a big action set piece. It's kind of more of a, this is to give you the feel of how they will defeat evil together. And then the Supreme Being turns up as well and finally catches up with them and sort of steps in and puts things right. But there is I mean, I suppose the reason it all takes place in one space and it is just a couple of archers and a couple of cowboys is because you then see later on when Kevin wakes up that's actually on his floor, isn't it? There's the checkers board that's then got a toy tank on it and it's got some toy cowboys on it. So again, was it just him playing in the middle of the night and not
Yeah,
quite
and like you
remember it?
say, like presumably budget limitations,
Yeah.
but turning that to an artistic advantage
Yeah, I
potentially.
think yeah, and I guess I'm always a fan, and maybe this is just I like a big bombastic kind of moment, and I love a like the arrival of the cavalry. That's always a big moment for me. I love that kind of stuff when everything
Mm.
seems lost, and then the sort of inevitable but surprising return of a character or allies or reinforcements or what have you. So that moment works really well, I think, and it's great fun. It just, I suppose, part of what undermines it a little bit is that they're really ineffective. So, like all of the archers, the tank, the cowboys, they don't really do anything. It's a kind of a cool moment, but then they don't actually achieve victory from those guys
Yeah,
doing
it's
that.
more like a symbolic resistance, which
It
then
is, yeah.
Dad comes along and solves.
Yeah, yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. Which I guess maybe that's the whole point of the movie as well, is that, like Kevin can't change this stuff on his own. He can imagine a world in which these things change, but he himself can't change his parents. He can't change his sort of the situation in which he finds himself. Like,
Mm.
so that evil, it is impossible to defeat, no matter how many cowboys he imagines, no matter how many tanks he imagines turning up. It's not going to make his parents love him and sort of, look after him as they should. So maybe that's part of what it's doing too.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that it's got like an ensemble dwarf cast, we haven't
Mhm.
really talked about much, but like that is obviously super striking. And like the a lot of the actors, a lot of the little actors in that are like people that you will have also seen in Return of the Jedi or Willow or yeah, like I've forgotten the name of the chap, but the chap inside R2D2 is one of the Time Bandits.
Sure. Is that Frank Oz?
No,
No.
no, that's Yoda and Muppets.
Right.
Um, and I don't know, like you don't see dwarf actors in films that often, and when you do, they're kind of bit parts. But here, like they're the whole kit and caboodle,
Yeah.
and you kind of they're a portrayal, they're a visualization of dwarfs that feel kind of in a more they're very different to the way that like the Hobbit movies more recently portrayed dwarfs as like very much larger creatures with
Yeah.
like big actors who have slightly been shrunk down, but like the proportions of their body are like huge hulking warriors and stuff. And these guys are just like they're just normal, like slightly gangly, grubby. Like the way that they're portrayed is just so much more like kind of old marauder sculpts of dwarfs
Sure.
or like halflings in the old world or something. They've got a totally different vibe to the Hobbit movie.
Yeah.
It would have been fun to see like a Terry Gilliam version of the Hobbit movies.
I think that would have
Well, the
been
Hobbit movie, let's be honest, it needed to be one
that
movie.
would have been genuinely fascinating. Yeah, I think that would. It was Kenny Baker, so forgive me.
Kenny Baker,
Yeah,
that's all
Kenny
right.
Baker
Yes,
plays
Kenny Baker.
Peachy.
So
Um,
what I will say is that I've mentioned that this is not my favorite Terry Gilliam
mhm.
film because that's Brazil. It's also not my favorite ensemble dwarf film. Have you ever
Okay.
seen Werner Herzog's Even Dwarfs Started Small?
No, I have not.
It
No.
is a towering work. It's an
Right.
incredible film. It's filmed it was filmed in like a little breathing space between shoots on Nosferatu. So it's shot in the early 70s. And he went to the little island of I think it's Fuerteventura that they filmed it on. And
Right.
they got an entirely dwarf cast. There are no regular sized actors in it.
Right.
And it's a little fable about there's some dwarfs in a sort of almost like an institute that you know how like they used to lock, people with mental illnesses up and just like keep them all contained. They've sort of
Mm,
done the same here with dwarfs. They've put them all into a little dwarf sort of residential home, and then something goes wrong, and the dwarfs rebel, and they go crazy for a day, and they sort of they rebut their authority, and they just go mad, and they just have a wonderful time. And it's like
right.
a lot of the dialogue is improvised, and the camera work is incredible, sort of handheld single shot stuff, and it's like one of the most joyful films I've ever seen. It's
Oh,
in
wow.
German and it's subtitled. But if you have watched Time Bandits and you are interested in watching another dwarf ensemble film, then Even Dwarf Started Small by Werner Herzog is 10 out of 10. Awesome.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I pace myself with Werner Herzog movies because slowly. I've never really delved too deep into his filmography, and I've been working my way slowly through his collaborations with Klaus Kinski. So
Hmm.
there's and that for
And I think
me,
this film is partly like, can I have a break from that
I
arsehole
can.
Kinski for a second?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine even Herzog would need a break. So that makes sense. But yeah, no, I think that sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely add that to the sort of longer
It
list.
is. It's phenomenal, and like you start watching it, and you're like, "Ugh, this is going to be a slightly awkward exploitation film," and it's
Mm,
just not. Like Herzog has so much humanity and humor and delicacy in his filmmaking, and he gives these actors like this incredible scope to just sort of fool about and really do something amazing, and like there are incredibly ludicrous scenes in it, which I don't know, just end up being really heartwarming. And I just think the whole thing's completely joyful.
oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, and Time Bandits ultimately has a sort of there's a certain joyful energy to
Oh,
it
yeah.
through that chaos. I mean, what did you think? So it was David Rappaport played Randall as the leader of the time, or the would-be leader of the Time Bandits. He
Hmm.
probably has the most complete arc as a character out of the Time Bandits themselves because
Yeah.
well, I say that. I don't even know if he sort of fully embraces by the end, if he fully learns a lesson. But I guess he's the most well defined, perhaps, is the way to
Mm.
describe it. Because he's obviously has led them to rebel against the Supreme Being, and it seems like it was his idea. And he is the de facto leader, even though they all don't think they have a leader. He kind of does
Yeah.
take them from place to place to place. But he's also quite hard and he's quite unforgiving and sort of doesn't really embrace his fellow time bandits quite that much. But by the end, he's maybe softened a little bit, perhaps. So
Yeah. There's that great scene on the Titanic where he takes Kevin aside and is like, "You and me are different to this rabble. We've got vision." And it's like, you can't even see Kevin like in the frame because it's so much not about him and Kevin. It's such a beautifully framed
yeah,
moment
yeah. I
whilst
mean,
he's like tapping ash onto his hair.
yeah, and odd choice to go for the Titanic, I would say. But they seem to be living it up and having a great time when they do.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, so Time Bandits overall, I mean, you can see, I think, its relationship to the creators, the early Warhammer sort of that vibe feels very similar. Like they're drawing on similar roots. It's a continuation. It's not a Monty Python film, but it's a continuation in some ways of a sort of Monty Python-esque approach to stuff. But obviously, it's Gilliam continuing his journey into like exploring his own concerns and kind of drawing on
Yeah,
that stuff.
and like some of the script writing definitely feels sort of sketch based. You
Mm,
move from one sketch about Robin Hood to another sketch about, such and like, yeah, like those feel very, very Monty Python in their construction.
yes. Yeah, I'd say so. But you're also moving towards a more cohesive narrative that Gilliam will increasingly attempt. I think he will always continue to come back to that kind of like disjointed sort of like
Yeah, I
discrete.
mean, you got to remember he wrote this fairly quickly as a
Mm,
commercial venture, and like there is nothing of that in the Brazil script. Like Brazil does not
sure,
have
yeah,
any
that's
sort
more
of
straight.
sketch-based episodic
Sure.
stuff. Like that's just a very, a very well considered single narrative arc. So I don't know. I think he and Michael Palin were like just making a deliberate like, look, we got to make a really fun movie that like
Mm.
that clicks. You know, every 2 minutes there's got to be something that are keeping people on their toes and keeping them amused. And so it's okay to put a little gag about Michael Palin having a medical problem.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. And maybe doing him a disservice there. I guess I was thinking about like later works like Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, where he would return to the sort of, these different worlds or sort of different field. And obviously, I know there's
Mm,
external factors at play there as well. But yeah, it's certainly
mm.
part of it. One thing with the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, just another little curious coincidence connection, I suppose, was just that James Wallace, the RPG designer who would found Hogshead and would publish Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay when Games Workshop stopped publishing it. So that's the first edition. He would go on to write an award-winning Baron Munchausen RPG, which is kind of a storytelling role-playing game where you're one-upping each other as you sort of tell this story together.
Very influential on me, particularly,
Right.
Jordan. The two things about that game I think are completely wonderful. One is that it treats the craft of designing RPGs as how do you structure conversations in an exciting and novel way. And I kind of I believe that to be, at least for the purpose of independent RPGs, like that's the purpose of an RPG, is structuring a conversation in an interesting way. And then the delivery of it is completely in character. Like it doesn't describe it as a role-playing game where it's like, okay, now here are the rules and here's the world that it comes. Like the whole thing is told to you in character as a game that I discovered, that I used to play with my friends around the smoking chairs. And so even the rules of the game are delivered as part of the in-universe
Mm,
fiction. Both of
yeah.
those things are wonderful.
Yeah, and it's
Well
yeah.
done, James Wallace. Yes. Also, as a kid, I used to collect the Hogshead Publishing Woof Warpstone magazines. I still have issues 1 through 7 in my folders here.
Oh wow, okay. What the actual warpstones or the
Yeah, the little
hogwash as
Warpstones, like
well?
the little fanzines, I ordered them direct from Hogshead. Like they
Oh, because they
arrived,
did
I
they did
think.
one, and I may be mistaken. They did Hogswash, which was their sort of little a folded A4 zine that they would release, which is absolutely fantastic stuff.
Am I misremembering? Was
Well,
Warpstone not
Warpstone
Hog?
was a larger format, sort of. It was still a fanzine, and it was
Yeah.
unofficial. I can't remember if Hogshead, like how involved they were, because it was quite close to Woof and they had lots of interviews and stuff like that. So Hogshead may have published some Warpstone. I'm
Maybe
not
I'm
sure.
just remembering that they had their logo in there because they were like, um,
It wouldn't
uh,
surprise me if they weren't involved, if they were involved in publishing it. And I could certainly be misremembering, but I do remember that Hogswash, which was the sort of
mm.
the very
All right,
thin.
I'm going to go to my archives, dig out these Warpstone magazines. They're actually in my deep, deep archive because there's a box of Woof stuff under my bed.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I
Because
mean,
I've got a copy of Woof up there, fifth edition, but my first edition rulebook was during the period of my life where I would scalpel off the soft cover spines of things and then like put them into lever arch
oh wow, yeah,
uh plastic envelopes so that like I could take out pages of rules when I
sure,
was playing. Because
yeah,
these role play games were complicated. You need like a filing system for the rules.
yeah. Well, I mean, Games Workshop
So I
encouraged it as
destroyed my
well.
first edition rulebook
Yeah,
through playing it.
they like that's why they would put little hole punch guides into White Dwarf during that era as well, so that you could take the pages out of the magazine, hole punch them, and stick them in your file. Because yeah, you were constantly adding to and amending and all of that sort of stuff. So it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. We didn't have as much we had a more DIY aesthetic. We had less respect of the physical sanctity of the objects. They were there to be messed with.
yeah, absolutely. And I think because we now live in a world where all of that stuff is so valuable, like monetarily speaking, and for other reasons, but now it's harder to come by that kind of stuff. It has its own like in like monetary value. So keeping things pristine has become a thing as well. But I guess that's a whole different conversation
Yeah,
that
there's a whole
that would
conversation about are we buying things because we think they'll be valuable in 30
but it's
years, like
certainly a
laying down
factor
wine.
for some of it. But yeah, the sort of final point I was going to say is a quote from Time Bandits that I really love. Was when the Supreme Being is asked, I think Kevin asks him, "Why do we have evil?" And just really offhand, the Supreme Being is just like, I think it's something to do with free will. Like he offers no further explanation. It's just really so well delivered. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that is awesome.
But yes, so that was our sort of first film in the double bill. The second film is something that's a little bit more controversial, I would say, than Time Bandits. So this is a film by Ken Russell called The
Right,
Devil.
we go from a family film to not a
Not so
family
much a
film.
family film, right? Yeah, it came out 10 years earlier, came out in 71. And we will just have a little content warning for everybody who's going to go off and watch it or sort of take a look at it. It is quite challenging, I would say. It deals with some quite deep, challenging themes. There's a lot of things about religious hysteria. There's a lot of violence, and there's a lot of uncomfortable um activity takes place in the film. So
Let's be clear, there is depiction of blasphemy, there is depiction of sexual acts, and there is depiction of torture.
yeah, I think that's yes, and quite graphic in some places with all.
Yeah, and this is a serious art film, so these things are dealt with in a grown-up, artistic, novelistic way, not a. Well, I don't know. I laugh a lot in the first 10 minutes of the film, which we'll get through,
There's
but
some dark humor in there as well, for sure, and
there's a
some
lot of dark humor in
yeah,
this.
absolutely,
It's
and it's
not. It's like, but I think that's one of its strengths, as we will get into, it's truly a grown-up film where it
yeah,
is not shying from mature themes, but it is also not shying from the full gamut of humanity.
yeah.
But like, I guess it's yeah. So you mentioned a film that was like that came out kind of in the formative moments of Games Workshop's history,
Mm.
and here is a film that's also kind of particularly for British audiences, kind of I think relatively well known simply through its controversy, and so the guys I'm assuming particularly. Particularly the people of artistic bent like John Blanche would have known about this film,
Mm.
and so here's another film that I think is like an input to some of the sort of vibe.
Sure.
um, and the reason I think that John Blanche might have seen it is because the strength of its visuals, the strength and strangeness of its portrayal of religious imagery, and the strangeness of its portrayal of sort of not quite medieval, but like Renaissance France is, I
Mm.
think, really. I don't know. I just see a lot of resonance with the way that particularly stuff like Mordheim ends up carrying itself.
Sure, yeah, and I think there's plenty to explore in terms of how some aspects of this have found their way. I think whether or not this was a direct influence or not, there is definitely echoes of what takes place in the Devils and how it's framed, how it looks. It very much is present and relevant to both Warhammer Fantasy and 40K, I think. But the
Mm.
the story
So
then, for anybody who hasn't seen the Devils, so like very, very broadly speaking, in summary, you've got so this is set during its French history, and there is an independent city that has these great high walls, and it's got a sort of strong priestly figure who is the defender of the faith within that city, and that's played by Oliver Reed. Um, but the king doesn't want there to be these kinds of independent bastions of political power or thought.
more exactly, Cardinal Richelieu is the head of the Catholic Church in
Yeah,
France, and he is looking to seize control of France, and so
yeah.
he has got the king's ear and is telling him the only way to unite France is to destroy these independently run cities.
Yeah, that's a much better way of framing that. And so Cardinal Richelieu is going to use whatever means he might have available, whatever tools he can, in order to bring down those walls and bring down that priest and take control of the city. Unfortunately for the priest, he's quite an although he is a Catholic priest, he's maybe a bit unorthodox. He kind of is a little bit dismissive of some of the hierarchies and some of the sort of more formal strictures. He's maybe a little bit of a womanizer as well. And
and
that,
and critically, he's sympathetic to the Protestants, and he is proud that the city of Loudun like never erupted into secular violence.
yeah, yeah. And then there's also a convent or a nunnery within the walls. And the head nun, the sister, is essentially she's sexually repressed, and she becomes obsessed with this priest. And through a series of happenings, she ends up accusing him of having seduced her and seduced the nuns and being in league with the devil and sort of causing a degree of possession and things like that. Now, whether or not there are merits to this case, Cardinal Richelieu is absolutely ecstatic to take advantage of it, sends out his best men to basically find quote unquote evidence and proof of this devilry and seduction, and to then use that against Oliver Reed to bring him down, essentially. And that's the sort of meat of the story, right?
Right, and the critical point here is that like what you see is the like institutional Catholic faith, or like some elements within the institutional Catholic faith in France, using witch hunting and exorcism and hysteria of that nature at that time to like politically destroy and then physically murder another Catholic priest. And I think that's the sort of one of the central messages of this film, is dealing with the fact that like the horrors of the witch hunting, how much of that was independent, hysteria or independent power grabbing, and how much of that was just like pure politics.
Yeah.
And this film says, yeah, it's like in this case, it's 100% politics. This was a purely political act. It destroyed, hundreds of people, literally or spiritually, but it was for a political aim that Cardinal Ricci was supporting.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so going into the film, we're like, with the mystique around the film, with the title, the devils,
Hmm.
with the strange religious imagery, you can well be forgiven for thinking this is going to be a supernatural film. And it's not a supernatural film. It's an entirely historical film. And in fact, it's based on two separate historical accounts of the witch trials of Loudun. And so you get to the end of the film and you're like, oh God, this was actually just a really horrible indictment of like the corruption that can exist when politics and faith mix.
Yeah, it's devastating. It's challenging because of what you see, but the message is also extremely challenging, and it's quite confrontational. It's putting everything on display in every sense. And yeah, I mean, it's based on John Whiting's play, which itself was based on Aldous Huxley's non-fiction book about the devils of Loudun. And
Hmm.
I think there's some details that have been either included in one or not included in another, and that sort of stuff. They're not identical, but it does lead to, like, the first thing that I think is great is the sort of opening credits sort of smash. So you have a very almost debauched sort of play taking place, sort of musical play that the king has put on. Cardinal Richelieu just has to watch it because he has to
The
maintain
king
his
hasn't put it on. The king is the central character and is
yeah,
wandering around in a codpiece.
yeah,
It's so
exactly.
good.
It's really self-indulgent.
And
It
it's
basically is.
sumptuous. Like it's visual. Like it visually sets the tone for the film. That like this is going to be a film set in Renaissance France, but it's not going to be like a grubby little muddy
Hmm,
situation. Like every character in this film, particularly the important ones, think of themselves as modern. This is happening now. This is a modern setting. This may be 400 years ago, but it's not 400 years ago for them. It's the cutting
sure.
edge, and so everything's bright and garish and beautiful. And as we'll get to, like the architecture and the walls of the city,
Very
everything's
interesting.
pristine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the intention, or one of the intentions, I think, is to show almost how, like, the same level of sort of debauchery and self-indulgence that is thrown out as accusations to individuals and, as part of witch trials and witch hunts in this world are are happening at court, and Cardinal Richelieu is right there and is just, fine, whatever. I mean, he's bored, he's yawning basically because he just has
Yeah.
to be there for political reasons. But it's fine if the king does it, but it's maybe not so fine if other people do it over whom Richelieu has power or wants power
Hmm.
from. And then you just get so you have this like relatively long performance to open the film, and then there's just the sort of smash cut of Ken Russell's film of the Devils, which I think is just brilliant. Like just the sort of almost this kind of archaic language to introduce it as well. It's not just Ken Russell's The Devils, it's his film of the Devils, because there is a book about it and there is a play about it. So this is his film about it, which I think puts it in, kind of, it positions it alongside those other works as part of this sort of canon of the exploration of what happened in Ludan. And then yeah,
Yeah, and like this is and what like if you listen to Mark Kermode, who's obsessed with this film, is it Mark Kermode or Mark Kermode? I've never figured out
I
whether
think
you're
I've always said
pronouncing like
commode, but
Kermit or
yeah,
the is it
yeah.
like the toilet or the frog? Anyway, Mark Kermode is obsessed with how this film is like one of the most successful pieces of cinema of this period of British filmmaking.
Mm,
And who am I to argue with Mark Kermode? But I think one of the things that, like, just to hook onto your comment there, is like it's such a filmy film. Like the
mm,
language that it uses is so filmic. It's like so much of the meaning and the story is built out of these visual moments and these like intercuts between particular characters, this like visual imagery,
mm,
whether it's the man in the bird suit being shot, whether it's the like the blackened bone at the end. Like there are these incredible, or whether it's the walking across the water, like there's incredible imagery that is combined together to create the meaning of the film. Like you can't read the script and understand the fullness of the text like it is. And the music as well, like
mm.
very specifically selected a very difficult modern composer who then creates some very incredible modern music for the film. Like the whole thing is,
Yeah.
God, so good. Ah!
Yeah, and there's no fat on this film at all. I think like everything, like you say, it's all working in concert to make the points that the film wants to make, to explore the things it wants to explore. That music is it is a perfect reflection of the content of the film in that it is because it's a lot of it's like discordant noise at times because it's just trying to put you off kilter. It's intentionally sort of creating this discomfort, I think, in
Did
certain.
you read the toilet quote or hear the toilet quote?
No, tell me that.
I think it's so it was from one of the interviews with Ken Russell, but I think it might have been something from the Aldous Huxley book where Aldous Huxley
Right.
describes
Yes, in
the
fact, I have seen
describes
it.
the sort
Yeah.
of orgiastic pantomime that the nuns put on
Yeah.
as essentially like a religion happening in a public lavatory. And so this phrase, like religion happening in a public lavatory, becomes this like central image for Ken as he puts together and as he works with I've forgotten the composer's name right now, and also Derek Jarman, who did the set design. Like they all come together and like it sounds like it's in a public toilet, it looks like
Mm.
it's in a 70s public toilet. There is white tiles everywhere, and like the cleanliness of that like is really like starkly set against the sort of the vile body horror of some of the pantomime. And then the music is like really aggressive and discordant, and it sounds wrong and it's echoing
Mm.
in strange ways. And the churches with their black columns and the nunnery with their white toilet like tiles,
Yeah.
and the environment is so alien and strange. It's the first time I watched it, it really put me in mind of the closing sequences of 2001, in that like
Sure.
white strangeness.
Very much so. Yeah. And I also, I think the interiors of like the Nostromo in Alien, for example, like with a lot of the sort of odd white rooms and stuff like that. It is a strangely futuristic at times kind of set design.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. And like and that like almost that futuristic architecture, like the walls are tall and white and angular, the
yeah,
walls of the city. And that's because Ken and Derek Jarman said, these walls have just been built. These are not, we're not going to go to Ludan now and film grey moss covered stonework. These were like built within the last 20 years or 5 years. Like these are fresh white stone from the quarries down the road. Like this is a city that they're proud of. This is new, it is modern. And so that is, whether or not it literally looks like what Ludan looked like in
mm,
1650 or whatever it was, like that's not the point. The point is, like, to our eyes it looks sharp and modern and
yeah,
contemporary and clean. And then like within those clean white walls there is disease and plague
sure.
and bring out your dead and eyeballs filled with maggots and people dying with bloody mouths. And what
Yeah.
fresh lunacy is this, a crocodile? Do you like that bit? He just throws that out the window.
Yeah, there's just
throws the crocodile out the
crocodile.
window.
Yeah, they're using in order to like they're using leeches and they're using like acupuncture and cups
Yeah, there are
therapies and
two
all sorts.
quack doctors in
Yeah.
the film that show up again and again.
And then they're using a crocodile as well, apparently.
Fresh lunacy is this? There's I love a film with good shouting in it, and Oliver Reed's shouting in The Devils is, top five shout. It's up there
Reed is
with
on
like
great form in this movie.
it's up there
Really
with
fantastic.
Excalibur for the amount of top shouting, or
But yeah,
you
just
know what I
going
mean.
back to the sort of the set design and stuff, I think that's a really great point about the sort of sharpness and the cleanliness and the modernity of that set design, juxtaposed with, like you say, you've got victims of the plague and the death carts and all that kind of stuff and that grubbiness within the city. That really feels 40K esque to me at times, and I know a lot of 40K is run down and knackered and futuristic and all that sort of stuff. But the way in which you have this juxtaposition of these two things is really interesting. Similarly, you get the nuns and their sort of their ritual and their kind of the rigors of their faith early on, and it is in this weird science fiction like space because it is all these white tiles. It could almost be a pristine brand new London Underground station or something. Like it
Yeah,
has
it's a
that
really
feel.
strange look. I can't remember what the how the dates line up, but like some of those moments, yeah, like the moments where the nuns are gathered together, like there's visual echoes of Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain in there. Like it's really psychedelic.
Mm.
Oddly enough, Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain also funded by Harrison.
Oh yeah, and we actually forgot. I forgot to mention that, like the Harrison just jumping back to Time Bandits for a second, is that Harrison did some of the music for Time Bandits as well. So they
That
used,
was that was inserted at his insistence.
was it okay?
Yep.
Right,
He
fair
was,
enough.
yeah, that was strong armed in.
Right. Well, I don't think. I mean, I'm
I
sure
think
they
it works
tried
quite well,
to.
but
It does work, I think. But in the Devils, I'm sure they tried to strong arm some stuff here, but I don't think much got strong armed in. Even though it's distributed by Warner Brothers, like they really go to some extreme lengths in the movie, and I think that obviously contributed to its controversial nature, and then that contributed to Warner Brothers more or less burying the film for a great many years. Even now, difficult to get hold of the Devils, really. Um, but yeah,
yeah,
the
and there are still key scenes that were like integral to the script, which were cut during censorship,
right.
cut during film board censorship, and never returned. I think even the version that I bought on DVD this year does not have the infamous rape of Christ scene reinserted.
Right, okay. Because there was so this be there are so the nun Vanessa Redgrave plays an incredibly just it's like her performance is great, very understated at times, but also like smoldering with intensity. She's the sister superior who becomes obsessed with Oliver Reed's priest, and she's seen him, she fancies him basically. She because she is sexually repressed, she like it is all sort of bubbling away, and she starts whilst is leading the prayers with her fellow nuns. She's having these visions of Oliver Reed as Christ, and then they're not making love, but they're like she's
There's a carnal fantasy that is like
yeah,
horribly mixed with with Christian imagery to
yes,
create something that's really genuinely unsettling.
very much so.
Um, and you think the way that the camera moves and like there's a moment where the camera they've sort of kissed and then the camera lingers on his face as she descends, and that's like in film language that tends to be a sort of an indication that there's going to be sexual activity,
Yes.
and then it isn't, and it's something weirder and more horrible. And so like that command of the language to unsettle you, I think, is really affecting.
Yeah, I agree completely because it's so suggestive. That moment is so suggestive of a sexual act that's about to be performed. But then actually she starts interacting with the wound on Christ's side. And it's just
Mm.
very uncomfortable, very strange. And obviously because it's in a strange
Well, and this
place.
and yeah, and this is I think like sort of true of, I think what is supposed to be true of these nuns is that they are um I think it might even be mentioned towards the end of the film, but like these are women who are mostly from sort of noble or semi-noble birth,
Yes.
but there isn't enough money at home
Yeah.
to wed them off. So they kind of get stuffed in a nunnery. They don't really have a vocation to, spend their whole life, in contemplation of Christ. And so there's a lot of frustration and resentment, and it is all compressed and held back by
Mm.
the you know the authority of their order and the rituals that they go through. And so Vanessa Redgrave's character begins to bubble out of its own accord because she's at the top of this structure, and so
Mm.
she, I think, almost feels there's a space for her to explode upwards as the sort of the pot boils over. But everybody else, they have to wait until they are given an explicit excuse by the incredible witch hunter
Yes.
character who arrives. And there's an incredible moment where the witch hunter trials are beginning, and they take them out into the forest, and they are threatening to kill all of these women. And then there's a moment where what is this? So like in I'm just going to make a sort of fascist Germany comparison here.
Mm.
So in fascist Germany, there was a mode of talking where you would instruct your cronies to carry out an act without specifically describing what was going on, and there was a shared understanding of what, like, there's a classic comedy sketch about, like, deal with him,
Sure.
and so like the witch hunter comes and he uses this sort of language. And there's this moment when he goes, "You will scream, you will blaspheme." And they all kind of nod. And you're supposed to, as an audience member within the setting, you're supposed to be like, "Oh, he's speaking to the devil
Mm.
inside them, and the devils are agreeing that they are going to." But of course, it's not. It's just he's saying, "Will you go crazy
Yeah.
for us as a pantomime performance?" And of course, these women are repressed and frustrated and have been under the thumb of their, like, order for many years, and so they do, and they
Yeah.
are, essentially threatened with death if they don't anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like it's such a complex. It's like,
It's really complex. Yeah.
and it's like, well, does that mean their faith was false? Well, no, of course it doesn't necessarily mean their faith was false, and everything that they do is then, like, dripping with the trappings. And so what of this previous life that they lived was itself theater, and what was genuine
Yeah.
spiritual life? And yeah,
Yeah.
and
Because this all comes about because so Redgrave's character, she's having these sort of visions. She's in this place of extreme, like, frustration, and she requests that the priest sort of start working with the church, with her particular nuns. He turns her down at the same time as a woman who's lost her child, who was sort of seemed like she might be turning to the faith, ends up marrying Oliver Reed. So now, like, so that's a sort of double hit for her. She's lost a potential convert, and that person is now married to the priest that she's fallen in love with and become obsessed with. So that is when she accuses the Oliver Reed's character of seducing her, and sort of, with all of this witchcraft and devilry.
and it's really subtle, isn't it? Because she says truthfully that a priest has invaded her
Yes.
thoughts,
Yeah.
which of course he has. She's obsessed with him, and so she is having erotic fantasies about him. That's completely understandable and normal. And then the political people around her say,
Yeah.
invaded upon your thoughts, as in he's possessing you like a demon. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, demon. And
exactly.
then she says no, and then she smiles and laughs and begins to say yes. And it's an incredible transformation, I think. That moment where he says, she says, like, "He came to my room, name him." "I cannot, it was dark." And then she laughs. And then he says, did he come alone?" And she says, "No, he had 6 of his minions with him." And she sort of smiles, because that's the point where it's clearly gone ridiculous.
Yeah.
And everything from that point onwards is ludicrous fantasy.
Yeah.
But, like, I love that little laugh
But
that
that is
transforms
great.
the
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point there about how, so it does start as a truth for her, but she has a reason to sort of elaborate. And the priest that she's telling it to is sort of another priest who knows Reed, who doesn't like him because of his sort of dismissive attitude. So he has a reason to like take it as, oh, well, you must be talking about him then, and I've got to tell some people about this. And then Richelieu has a reason for wanting it to be something more, and he sends certain people who want to impress Richelieu, so they've got a reason, and the witch hunter turns up and he's got a reason because this is his job. So it is incentivized. Every single person is incentivized for it to be actual witchcraft from Reed.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter that it's not the case, but they all find ways to, even those quack doctors become involved. There is a local sort of like landowner and a rich sort of noble whose daughter is pregnant because of Reed's dalliances. Who, because he was a bit of a womanizer before, so he's got a
Sorry,
reason.
just to interrupt. That is probably my favorite line in the film when he's early in the film. He's lying with that nobleman's daughter,
Yeah.
and she says, "I'm pregnant," and he almost turns to camera and just says, "And so it ends."
Yeah, because he is so. I mean, his name is Father Urbane, and he is just he is still just a man. He's a man of faith, and he is a man of faith, but he's also flawed in many ways.
And I think that's where the most delightful arc of the film comes from, or the most. I mean, let's be honest. This is an incredibly grim and dark
ultimately
film
very bleak. Yeah.
where the central character starts as a womanizer and as a power hungry, you know, he's very proud,
Yeah.
and he begins to discover through defense of the town his own purpose, something bigger than him, and ultimately his own spirituality. And then he is placed in this incredible pantomime and destroyed, and everything that survives is corrupt and false. And the central character who started corrupt and false and goes on a journey to essentially being, a good and complete human, is utterly destroyed by, falsehoods and just unassailable power of the mob, of the church, of the politics. Like, there's nothing he can do. No truth that he speaks can affect this like snowball that's now rolling to crush him.
Yeah. Yeah, and he actually has incredible dignity throughout and handles it, like his restraint and because it's so frustrating just what's happening to him and seeing the people in power do this to him. And we know it's false. We've seen how this thing has grown. And then there's sort of, what becomes a hysteria, the sort of religious hysteria around it, because of all the incentivized people who have been encouraged for various reasons to just pile on and pile on and pile on. So you're seeing all of this injustice happening to this guy, and he fights it, but it's impossible to fight, and he ultimately, he dies in a horrifying way, but he keeps his dignity throughout. I also quite like there were a couple of believers in him throughout as well. So even
Mm.
when these charges are being thrown out to him, there's just a couple of folks from the town who are like, "What this is absurd." And actually, one of those,
Yeah, and they are the text underlining the fact that this is a falsehood. This isn't, you are not. There's a couple of moments that puncture the pantomime. One happens very early on, where after that conversation that I recounted between the witch hunter and Vanessa Redgrave, the Baron, the main like political animal in this situation, he turns to his crony and says, "This is ridiculous. Like, this is never going to work. Like, this is obviously false." And so the whole thing is like punctured at every juncture with, and those two characters, those two town folks, become a sort of almost like a Rosencrantz and Guildenthorne like chorus at the side, going like, "By the way, just remember that this is all nonsense."
yeah, Kenneth Colley plays one of those, and he's actually in Jabberwocky.
Is he?
Yeah, in the Gilliam film, he plays an amazing role. He's one of the religious zealots, so he's one of the he's at the other end of
Right.
the spectrum where he's fully embraced the sort of the he's like a flagellant who's trying to convince people to flagellate themselves. And he's also in Star Wars, of course. He's one of the Imperial captains in Star Wars. But yeah, great actor.
Oh.
Just did a lot of these sort of little bit parts throughout his career. Really, really fantastic. And sadly passed away early this year, which is a real shame.
Oh.
But yeah, really, really fantastic and a great performance in very, very brief moment of just humanity within the film.
I was going to say, without getting too much into like the graphicness of the nun's performance, I
Mhm.
think that one thing for me that like when we were talking about like what films maybe or definitely influenced the sort of the world or the visuals of particularly John Blanche's Warhammer world, I find that the extremity and like ridiculous overblownness of the religious imagery in this film particularly, like it always catches in my mind of like the excessive ritual, the excessive
Mhm.
kind of overblown the shouting of the words that the witch hunter speaks, like that witch hunter character, like it definitely could just be like some kind of confessor in either the 40k world
Yes.
or the Warhammer world.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
way that he speaks is so insanely
Yeah.
overblown.
It's fantastic. I love the witch hunter. So this is Michael Gothard as Father Barry, and he comes in like a rock star into the movie, and even down to like he's got his arms out, and he just feels like a proper. He is over the top. He almost could be from a different film, like a straight comedy, because he's so over the top. But that's part of the point, I think, is that he is there to whip up the fervor and to basically put on a show. That's his
Mm,
role, and I think that absolutely there is a version of Inquisitors and Witch Hunters in 40k and Warhammer Fantasy who are playing a similar role. Now, obviously, the difference in those worlds being that there are demons and that there is chaos, but the way in which they act, I think, could easily be very similar at times. And also
mm.
the fact that these guys, whether you're playing Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, whether you're playing Inquisitor, the game, whether you're playing 40k or Warhammer proper, when a witch hunter turns up, they are like rock stars turning up because they are these iconic, like very stylish characters who are full. They are full of character. They sort of set apart from a lot of the other forces. So I think that there's a
and
real
and
element
their
of that.
like and their unimpeachable power as well.
Mm,
Like even as the king himself debunks the charade
sure.
that's happening in front of him, it's still not enough to it just pings off this inquisitor's armor.
Yeah, which was a brilliant moment because it also shows how the king literally doesn't care, really. So the king is brought in on with all of his all of his followers, his court, and it's still the same kind of debauched over the top nonsense. We've seen him earlier do his play. We've seen him earlier when Richelieu is trying to convince him that they should go and get involved. He's literally shooting. I mean, you mentioned it before, but he's shooting guys in like duck costumes and stuff who are just like let loose on the royal
He's
grounds.
shooting Huguenots dressed in blackbird
Right,
outfits.
blackbirds. Yeah, sorry, yeah, and he turns up in Loudun and is sort of ferried in on his palanquin. It's an
Because he wants to
amazing.
see the show. He
He
loves
wants
a
to see
good
the show.
show.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're getting the reversal of So we saw Richelieu have to sit through the King's performance and the King's show earlier on, and he was a bit bored and didn't really care. Now the King's turning up and sort of sitting through a bit of Richelieu's show. Similarly, doesn't really care. He comes to see the pantomime and see a bit of the sort of over the top nun fervor. But then on his introduction, which I think is fantastic, is he's holding a little mask in front of his face, and then he takes it off and he's got a mask on underneath, which I absolutely
Didn't
love.
notice that.
Just real excessive stuff. And yeah, he basically introduces to the witch hunter who's sort of putting on his performance. He says, "Oh well, here's a reliquary. Here's an item that will help to like bring out the truth from this nun,
The
and will
most holy artifact from
yeah,
the royal stores, a vial of
exactly."
Christ's blood.
Right, and the witch hunter goes along with it, and he uses it, and then the nun goes along with it, and she gives her true confession, compelled by this artifact, and then the king opens up the little box, and it's totally empty because he's just shown them all up for fools.
Yeah, and then just laughs in their
Yeah,
face.
and he's having a great time, and then he's done, he's gone because he doesn't really care about the outcome. That doesn't then cause, oh, well, this is an injustice. Let's stop doing this nonsense. They just sort of crack on. It just changes nothing. The performance has been done, and they've now ticked that box, and then they carry on with the trial and everything else. It's because you think that maybe that's a moment that the king's going to put a stop to it, maybe, and then no, it just does nothing.
No, he doesn't care.
No. So, and then you go into, yeah, you go into the sort of the rest of the trial and sort of the rest of the damnation. I mean, you get to a place where ultimately he is Oliver Reed's father Urbain Grandier is basically sentenced to death, and he's going to be burned to death, and the executioner sort of takes pity on him and says, "Listen, I'm going to come in and I'm going to kill you before the flames get to you."
I'll strangle you before they light the flames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then actually the way it plays out is that the flames get started before they're supposed to. The executioner can't get to him, can't kill him, so the flames take him, and it is just
And
absolutely horrifying.
this isn't like in a Hammer film where like, okay, you've lit the bushel, so now you fade to credits. No, you get like a 5 minute face
Yeah,
melting,
it's
and it's
really,
grim.
really grim, very rough, and yeah, it just ultimately shows how, because of the political machinations that caused the religious hysteria and these false accusations of witchcraft, and then the false injustice that sort of occurs, it was inescapable. So he is not able to get away from it.
And like, I guess to like cast a slightly wider connection point, like that, the speech that Grandier gives whilst melting is like incredibly well spoken and incredibly like you said before, it's like very measured and noble, and it's a strong message that like to me really resonates with like the punk culture of the 70s, early 2000 AD Judge Dredd. Like it is a question authority, don't trust the like power hungry, all they're trying to do is take our collective freedoms away from us. And so like for me the end of the film is like it's super anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment. It's
Yeah,
a very punk message at the end.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think its relevance to today's world is so important as well, because it absolutely is saying that you ought to be looking at who is encouraging these, if the stories that come out and the way in which those sort of they spread, and the memes and the messages, who's pushing them and what's the real
Are you
agenda.
suggesting, Jordan, that there might be ludicrous pantomime happening in today's world?
Listen, I'm not suggesting anything of the kind. Don't accuse me of that. But I am saying that there's, I think that the point being that it is well worth interrogating where this stuff comes from and how it gets proliferated and pushed and by
Yeah, and
who.
I think that that's like there's a moment in one of the conversations with Ken Russell where he literally underlines this point, which is that he said he wanted the film to look contemporary insofar as audiences recognize this as contemporary architecture, so that, as I said, you get a sense that this is not like a way back world. This is, for the characters in the film at least, like absolute cutting edge modernity. And that is literally because he's trying to say this thing that I'm portraying, this betrayal of trust, this mass hysteria, this control of the masses, like this is as much happening today in 1971 as it was in Renaissance France. This is an entirely relevant thing, and that's why the film looks so weirdly anachronistic.
Hmm. Yeah, because it's set in a timeless place, because its subject matter is ultimately timeless. And to move that across to 40K, you absolutely can see the parallels in how that sort of thing plays out through the Horus Heresy narrative, for example. And the sort of the way in which the stories are told, and the way in which people are influenced, and the way in which incentive structures result in certain narratives taking root, spreading more widely, that compels subsequent behavior. And obviously that leads to Horus's betrayal and everyone who goes with him. So there are, as an exploration of humanity and how this sort of stuff can happen, and people can fall in line with it and let it happen, and even make it happen. it's very powerful. I think the film is it really is like like I say, it was a challenging thing to watch, and it was quite it confronted me with a lot of very hard to watch visuals, but the narrative that stays with you after you've watched it is also quite tough to sit with because you can just see those parallels and you can see how that is such a dangerous thing and that we're not past it just because we're past those witch trials does not mean we're out of the woods, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a hell of a movie. It's a hell
It's
of a
great.
movie. And so they cut quite a lot of it initially to get it through the British Film Board. I think they put some of it back in later releases, but it never got returned to Ken Russell's original vision of the film.
Right.
But it was very close to being outright banned by the censors initially, and then it was banned for a while.
I believe so. Yeah, I think it was quite controversial, yeah. And hard to get hold of.
Yeah. And so I can't remember the timeline with this and A Clockwork Orange, but like the sort of and The Exorcist as well. Like there's a lovely patch of like extreme but also incredibly artistic films from around this early 70s period where I
Yeah.
don't know,
And
certain
Warner
directors
Brothers
were
were behind
really
the
exploring.
I think Warner Brothers distributed The Exorcist maybe as well. So obviously
Right.
they were doing they were making some bold choices, but then yeah, it's sort of largely been buried by Warner Brothers. I think they didn't want to release it again in the States for a long time. But then there's a little very strange addendum to the Warner Brothers of it all, in that they released Space Jam 2 recently. Well, it was probably a couple of years ago now. And in this era of sort of mega franchise, multiversal crossover stuff, where we've seen studios just rifling through their little toy box of IPs to get recognizable things to put into their movies. We saw it with the Lego Movie, for instance, or Ready Player One, or any of that sort of stuff. So Warner Brothers wanted to fill the crowds in Space Jam 2 with lots of characters from their other movies. So you get, obviously it's Looney Tunes, and you're going to get various family-friendly characters turning up in the it's going to be oh look, there's Batman and the Joker or whatever. But they also thought it would be appropriate in this family movie to put the Droogs from Clockwork Orange in there, which is
Wow.
a very strange choice. So you just got some Droogs drinking their milk or
Milk.
Moloko, just watching LeBron James play basketball with Looney Tunes, and then they also put I think I don't know if it's supposed to be Vanessa Redgrave's character or not, but one of the nuns from this movie wearing the very particular outfit, the way in which they're sort of the
Wow.
I forget what the term is
It
for
feels
the
like it feels like some artistic soul managed to secure a sort of general purpose permission to put some old Warner Brothers characters
can we
in and
just
then just
grab
went
some stuff? Yeah, it must be something along those lines because it's so strange because it's such a specific outfit. The way in which the black cross appears on the actual on the
right.
habit, it's
Yeah, unless it's historically specific, but
which
I
it
don't know that it is.
potentially could be. But given that this is a Warner Brothers IP, so the Devils is owned
Yeah.
by Warner Brothers, and that was a Warner Brothers movie, and they were using lots of their other IPs, it seems quite likely that it
Right.
have
And
just gone.
if there's also the Clockwork Orange, then there's a connection of like banned
Of just
movies,
going for that.
controversial
Yeah.
movies.
So
Yeah.
whether or not it's a rebellious like special effects artist or department, but for whatever reason, it's just the strangest thing that the
Well,
Devils
they
have
let it
a
go all
direct
the way to
connection to Space
production,
Jam.
so yeah.
Right. Really
That's a
weird.
cool fact. Actually, thinking about Clockwork Orange, I think one of the things that connects these two films for me is that the architecture, the use of space, the use of big white buildings, like
Mm,
they both feel very futuristic in their own strange way, with a mixture of like filth and rubbish strewn at the sort of at the foundations of those bright gleaming walls.
sure.
Yeah, it's a cool juxtaposition, which I think works really well. And I agree that like when you think about the Warhammer world, you think of grubbiness and mud, and you also think of shining wizards' towers, and you have to somehow put those two together.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Or yeah, the gleaming the gleaming high elf cities and all that sort of stuff as well, right? But yeah, I mean, I'd never seen the Devils before because it's quite hard to come by, and I think like even talking to my parents about it, and they'd heard of it and they knew its reputation. They had not seen it, but they were just aware at the time it came out of how controversial it was, and it stayed with them as being that controversial. So like it is fascinating how it's always been out there, but it's always had this kind of dark reputation. But I'm very pleased that you brought it and suggested it because I think it was fantastic, and I'm so glad that I've watched it now because it is, yeah, it was really worthwhile. I mean, I think if I were to
Yeah, I
say,
mean, I honestly think it's one of the finest pieces of cinema ever made. I'm, there's a few films that I think are just like towering works.
hmm,
I was delighted actually. I saw an interview with Gary Oldman recently, and he said that he was delighted and confused when people told him that The Fifth Element was their favorite ever film. I happen to adore The Fifth Element as well, because and then he said, "Have these people not seen In the Mood for Love?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, Gary Oldman, that's my number one film as well." Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. So like, I just think that The Devils is just so accomplished. It's
hmm,
like, Ken Russell was both like very experienced at this point. Like he'd made tons of movies, tons of musicals, TV like productions for the BBC. He'd made documentaries, and he knew a lot of people. Like he was, very well connected in the industry. He was, working with playwrights. He was putting on operas with people. He was working with these, serious modern composers, and he had most of it was shot in Britain in Pinewood Studios, and he had all of that sort of skilled labor available to him. He had Derek Jarman, doing the design, just a young artist that he'd met through a friend. And I just think that like the confluence of like experience, skill, and still like a kind of youthful, rebellious sort of anti-authority, like just the soul of a poet and an artist that sort of beats through that film. Like it's so aggressive,
hmm.
it's so uncompromising, it's so beautiful, it's so successful as a piece of cinema. I don't know, it's just incredible film.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great argument for it and a great summation of it, Mike. So yeah, and I think if anybody is intrigued by like hearing about it, if you've not seen it, then I definitely would say it's worthwhile watching, but I would just reiterate that it's quite, it's quite a difficult watch, so just be advised going in on it. But yeah,
The
well worth it.
one of the guys who ran the is it the anti Defamation League in New
Right,
York City, like one of the sort of religious leaders. He's on the DVD extras talking about his reaction initially to
right,
the Devils, and he's keen to point out that in his opinion, the portrayals of blasphemy in the film are portrayals of blasphemy. They are not blasphemous.
sure.
They are portrayals of people using religious acts and imagery and symbolism for their own ends. And the film is very specific about the fact that this is. So for his, like, there was a lot of worry from the general populace that this was a blasphemous film. It was taking, religious imagery and using it in horrifying ways, which it is, but with a message, with a point.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to say that, yes, content warning, but also, there were some religious leaders who could see that the blasphemy was a representation of blasphemy, which did occur because it was a
Yeah.
historical film.
Yeah, which is important because it is. I don't think at any point it's saying that faith is wrong. It's saying the way in which Cardinal Richelieu exploits people's faith is wrong, and exploits the structures and strictures of the church in order to get his way is where things are going wrong. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I don't even think it's an anti-Catholic film because
no,
the central Catholic character is so sympathetically portrayed.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, but yeah, Mike, it has been absolutely fantastic to chat about two very different films, but very interesting films. So thank you so much for joining us for a Warhammer Film Club chat. It's been really, really great.
Absolute pleasure, Jordan. I have got a about 3 dozen metal orcs that I need to go and paint now, so that's what I'm going to spend my lunchtime doing.
Fantastic. Well, all of your information will be down in the description below so people can go off and find you and check out all of the good stuff that you're working on at Planet Smasher Games. But for now, thanks once again for joining us, Mike, and thank everybody at home for listening to us. It's been fantastic. Thank you again for joining me and my magnificent guest, Mike Hutchinson from Planet Smasher Games. If you would like to support the show, you can join patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery, where you'll get early access and exclusive content, including a research article about the links between Time Bandits and Warhammer history. Tune in next time as Dave Chilvers from Olden Demon joins me to talk Starship Troopers and carry on up the Khyber.